Hey, Dave Adams here. Just taking a step out. I'm still on break. I'm still. Well, I'm actually still really sick. I'm not doing great at all in terms of that. I'm feeling pretty rotten, but I'm still getting tons of marking done. So that is my life for the next couple of weeks still. So I'm not going full ball back into doing any sort of videos at this stage, but I am trying. I was thinking today, so I am still doing design stuff and trying to think through some design ideas. And one of the things that caught my attention today that I thought I'd take a moment just to share with you is I came across this Noughts and Crosses set. Now, one of the things I've been challenged with of late is that in design, trying to take ideas and shape them or reshape them, think about things differently. And I sat there and I just started to play with this set. I just thought, well, Noughts and Crosses is a known game. There's two people who know how to play the game should always end in a draw. It's settled. Like there's it's got a finite number of moves, um, finite number of possible maneuvers and strategies, and it should always end in a draw regardless. Now, I thought, well, what if I could change that somehow? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you this really funky board, which I actually stole from the classroom from the teacher who owns it. I will return it tomorrow. But thank you, Mr. Hilton. However, I'm going to show you the board. I'm going to go through a couple of things that I was playing with, just as a way of sort of trying to build design. I'm not saying that this should result in a game, but it does. It is about trying to rethink how we design, or rethink, or questioning at least the status quo, or what we know, and seeing if we can make it anew somehow. And I think that's one of the things we found with designers as Ricky and I have gone through the core mechanic, is that some of the really innovative stuff that we've enjoyed hasn't been new. It's just been old stuff done in a new way, or brought fresh, or updated somehow, and we've really liked it. Like, it's like Ascension isn't a new concept, it's a deck builder, but the way they did it was great. So I've got set up a couple of lights, and it's pretty dodgy. I've just set up some lights in my office. Hopefully I've not washed it out entirely, but it's a I'll show you the board, and I'll show you some of the things, just to show you some of the stuff that I was thinking through and how it might impact design.
Okay, so here's the board. It is a nice marble board. I have not taken the time to light it properly at all, just to try and make sure it's not pitch black. So here's what I was thinking. A standard game, crosses always goes first. So crosses goes first, and normally, no matter where you go, whatever the starting position is, there's a counter position, and from there it should end in a draw. No problem. Now, here's the thing. So how do I take it and make it more interesting? Well, to stop it from being a known element, I could simply add more squares. So if I was to make this, instead of a 3x3, if I was to make it, say, a 4x4, now suddenly I've got a larger play area. The known element changes, and I can play more pieces. I need more pieces, obviously, to play it. I wouldn't be able to do it with this. But now the game's changed, and now the known element has changed. It's now probably not unknowable, but it's not entirely knowable. Like there's far more permutations than what you can do in play moves and that sort of thing. So that would be one way. I could increase the number of spaces, adding to the. It doesn't add to the complexity so much. It does a little bit, but it more or less adds to the amount of time and moves that you can make. Now that's one way, but I thought I'd restrict myself to just the 3x3 board and think about sorts of things that I can do. So one of the things I thought I could do was, well, what if I added in abilities or some sort of technique? So for instance, let's say that I had a rule that said that whenever, once per turn, or once per game, instead of taking a move, I could swap two. So now what I've done is I've added an additional move to the game, and that changes what is now a known game to an unknown game, I think, anyway. Like I don't think it would take long to work out what all the possible permutations are, but even in the short term, so let's say I started there, if I can go orthogonally in one direction, maybe my next move would be, for a standard move, I'd go down here, which means I'd have to go here. But I could change the game up, and then my one move could be that. Okay, well, that changes the game, but not in my favor, obviously, so I probably wouldn't do that. But that's one thing that could occur in the game, and that would now mix up the gameplay. So now there's more possibilities. I could even have some sort of rule where it's I can continue to do that so long as each piece only moves once. So that could mean that could happen anywhere on the board, any number of times. But once these pieces have moved, now these pieces are not allowed to move again. And I think what that could do is that when the board starts to fill up, that could start to add to some of the complexity. Obviously, I've set myself up in a win position there. Let's go that way, for instance. So we get to here, and now I can start to play and manipulate the board. And now I've got a lot of options. Now there's a few different things I can do. Or maybe even if I want to take it to each space can only have things move once, which means that I could switch those two, and those two spaces wouldn't be allowed to have any swaps again. But now I could swap these two. Now I've pushed that all the way down from the top of the board to the bottom of the board, and I've created a whole different win condition. As you can see, I've set up the win there. So that would be an entirely different way of doing it. But now it just means that those two can't swap again with each other. So just changing the rules slightly. Obviously, it's not perfect. I'm not trying to show you perfectly what all of this would look like, but there's different things we can do to switch up the game. So let's go back a bit now. Let's think through some other things we could do. We could have different maneuvers for the actual noughts and crosses themselves. But what about different starting styles? Now, we know that crosses always has to start a game, but that creates a certain scenario where noughts are essentially at a disadvantage, that unless that noughts can only ever hope for a draw. Crosses, well, really, as I've said, really, it's a known game, so they can only ever hope for a draw too, but they still have some minimal advantage. But we could change that. We could find different ways to start the game. We could say that X always has to start in the middle, or if X starts, we could provide a different starting different start routine for noughts, and they could get to place 2 down on their first turn only. So that sort of mitigates the first turn advantage for crosses. So now from there, the game would play out in whatever way it might normally play out. However, it doesn't guarantee that we've solved any of the known element, or it doesn't really change necessarily the fact that this game could run out. Now, of course, I should also note that crosses always has one more because it always goes first, and changing that means that I need additional materials to enact a game properly, because really, theoretically, noughts should have finished that game. So yeah. So that each different rule, each different change impacts the game in some other way. I could have a game where essentially you roll to go first, and then okay, so that player gets a 1, that player gets a 5, they get to go first, and so then they're the blocker for the turn. So I could even say that you only need 3 touching. So 3, go 1, 2, 3. But I could also add in triangles if I have, maybe the win condition is triangles instead, and so I'd be trying desperately to stop a triangle from occurring. I don't know if I can actually do that, but so maybe if I change the end condition. Anyway. But changing the end condition changes how it's played. Changing starting position changes how it's played. Changing what the things can do changes how it's played. So there's lots of different things that we can start to experiment with, even within this 3x3 grid, even if we kept it at that. But there's also other things. Like it could be, here's one that I think would be a good chance one. So let's say that to actually get on the board, you have to beat 1 plus however many pieces you have on the board. So at this stage, because there's 0, all I'd have to do is beat a 1. Okay, I beat a 1, so I get to place my X wherever I want. So noughts gets to go, they have to beat a 1. Okay, they beat a 1 as well, they get to go. Now X gets to go again, but they need to beat their 1 plus however many pieces they have on the board. So there's 1 plus 1. So now they need to beat a 2. Okay, they do that, no problem. Let's say they go there. Too easy. Noughts needs to do the same. They need to beat a 2. Too easy. All right. Now the game's getting interesting. Right. Now, X to go on needs a 1 plus 2 plus... Oh, sorry, 1 plus 1 plus 1. So now it needs to beat a 3. 5. Done. Sorted. O's need to do the same. 4. Good. Of course, X already wins this game, but X now needs 1 for the board, plus 1, plus 1, plus 1. So now we're looking for we need to beat a 4, so we need a 5 or a 6. Gets the 6, gets the win. But, so they didn't get a 6, they got a 4, then they don't get to go. So although that looks like an absolute win condition, if Noughts go, well, this is me rolling, of course, so of course it's not going to work. But they might actually be able to change the victory now. They might have a chance at a victory condition. They've got 2 now, but that's not a guarantee, because to get this now, they need a 5 or a 6, and they need at least a 5 and at least a 6 to get on the board. So now that whole adding the die element adds a random chance. Now, that's not to say it would be an enjoyable game. I've changed the way it's played. I've changed how it's played out. I've changed the known elements. Doesn't mean it's a fun game to play, but it might be. Who knows? The other thing I could do is we could add some hidden information. What I mean by that is, what if the win condition was whatever you drafted? You drafted a win condition. Let's say that was my card. I've got to get that in that pattern somewhere on the board, but the crosses, they have to get that pattern somehow on the board. Now, of course, that means, obviously I haven't thought this through when I did this up, because that means whoever gets the center one is going to win this. But if you put some thought into it, you could have drafting end results that don't necessarily conflict with each other, which means whatever you draft, you have a chance at winning. But it also means then that not only are you playing for what you want, you're watching your opponent, you're trying to learn, okay, what are they after to try and win? And so do you expend the move to block them, or try to block them in the hopes that you take their space? Or do you actually try and just go for the win yourself? The other thing is that, of course, if you do it well enough, and it's very difficult on a 3x3 grid, that you could have it so, let's say it was XXX, you could do that on any corner. So even if you got started there and someone took that, you still had the options of here, or around here. Does that make sense? I hope so. So this is just taking a simple everyday game and trying to rethink it and seeing what you can do with it to change how it's played and how players act within the game.
So when it came to me thinking about the play test that occurred, and I was really shocked or surprised at how the game was played. And it wasn't, I think the danger would be to say, oh, they played it wrong. They didn't play it wrong. They played it absolutely perfectly how they should have played it. The challenge is for me as the designer to think through, okay, if that's not how I want them to play it, then what do I need to do to incentivize certain play styles or types of play? And what can I do to change the way it's played? So I think I went through a couple of ideas last time. I'm going to implement a couple of those. I'll share them here. But one of the things I've really been thinking about is that end game and that start of game. One of the questions that came up was, going last is a really big deal in the game because you get to have the final say. Now that happens in every game. So why did my players feel like having the final say in my game that I designed? Why did they feel that final move was so pivotal, so important? And what can I do to overcome that? Or at least make them feel like there's, even if it's not 100% fair, the players need to at least feel like it's fair. And I think that's a key difference. Like I don't think you can necessarily make everything entirely fair, especially when you've got elements of randomness, which you get with first player turns or order of turns, or even how cards come out for drafting, that sort of thing. So there are elements which are going to be unfair, but whether the players feel like it's fair is what's really important. and making sure that the game isn't unbalanced as a result. And if it is fair and it doesn't feel fair, then I have to do something that convinces them otherwise, or demonstrate that it's fair. So I know that sounds really convoluted, but what I'm saying is it's all about the player experience there. It's about adjusting the game so that the player experiences something. They feel like not only do they have a chance, but they feel like that what is occurring is still, if it's not within their control, it's at least not within their opponent's control either, if that makes sense. So it's really creating that sense of balance and that sense of equity within the game. So that's me. I just got thinking about it. I really enjoyed sitting there playing with the noughts and crosses. And just to share an embarrassing story, I was explaining to the kids. The kids were like, because some of the kids had finished their work, they had nothing to do, so they just moved on to some free time. It was like the last 5 minutes of class, so it's not like they had a lot of free time. But they said that some of them were asking me about something. So they're saying, "Oh, you're having a game of noughts and crosses, Mr. Adams?" And I went, "Yeah, blah blah blah. This is a known game that it should never result in anything but a draw." And I was explaining all that stuff I did at the start. And one of the girls comes over and she goes, "Oh, I'll give you a game." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And then one of the kids asked me something, and I start answering, and she puts down a piece, I put down a piece. And I'm answering the question, she puts down a piece, and I'm answering the piece, and they go, "So what does it mean by known game?" And I explain, "Oh, well, this game, because everybody knows the moves, if you're anything past a grade 5, past the age of grade 5, you should pretty much have it worked out. You should never lose the game. You should always at least draw the game." At which point she put down the piece and said, "I win," and everybody laughed at me. And I was like, "That's not fair. I wasn't paying attention." And they went, "Yeah, right, Mr. Adams. That's so typically me." Oh well. However, just having to thinking out loud, going through some ideas, trying to think through the process and where to go to from here. I've got some interesting stuff that I'm looking forward to doing. When we do get back into doing proper videos, I'm really keen to get back into some more of the mechanics of gaming with when we start doing the now weekly or fortnightly. But also just wrestling with some of these ideas, which I think are really fascinating and fun to work with. Until then, my name's Dave Adams. I'll catch you next time.